All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tomorrow's Talent Series Q&A. My name is Cassie Munoz. I'm the Director of the Center for Educational Outreach at Michigan Tech. Tomorrow's Talent Series is all about showcasing in-demand jobs through virtual job shadowing videos, live Q&A events like this one, and hands-on activities. If you haven't checked out the website yet, you will see that that's where all of the videos are hosted, as well as this one here. So with that, we are going to get started. All right. Today we are welcomed by Caren. Caren is a pharmacist at the UP Apothecary. And we're going to learn more about what it's actually like to be a pharmacist. If you haven't checked out the video yet, Caren did an amazing job showing us all the behind the scenes. And today we're going to ask a little bit more about her thoughts on what it's like to be in her role. Welcome, Caren.
Hi. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Throughout today's session, if you have any questions, you can chat them into us using the Q&A feature down below, and we will take those and send them to Caren. So we do have a couple of questions already. We had some come in advance. So Caren, what aspects of this field made you want to pursue a career in it?
Well, I really liked math and science, and I knew that I wanted to do something in the healthcare field. And I worked at a breakfast restaurant in high school, and I really liked having regulars. I got to know over time. So I thought pharmacy would have like a similar experience to that, where I would be seeing the same people come in for their refills and kind of getting to know them. So that's why I chose to pursue a career in pharmacy.
Awesome. You know, that's one of the things about this month that we've noticed is that not all jobs in the healthcare field actually have to deal directly with patients. There are a lot of different positions that can have a good blend or are even more behind the scenes. So that is awesome. All right, another question that we have, what does a pharmacist who is specializing in infectious disease do? Are you familiar with that at all?
Oh, yeah. So normally they work in a hospital as like an inpatient pharmacist. So my video is more of like the retail side of things. But a pharmacist that specializes in infectious disease, they would kind of review or even help doctors decide what antibiotics to prescribe to patients. And then a lot of antibiotics require some monitoring, and they might follow up with the patient on those things as well.
Awesome. That's helpful information. I guess I didn't even realize that there was a specialization that was possible within pharmacies. That's great to know.
Yeah, more often at like a larger hospital.
Sure. Great. And what kind of education or training do you need to become a pharmacist?
Sure. Well, pharmacy school is about 4 years, but before that you have to do about 3 to 4 years of undergrad courses. And then once you're in pharmacy school, the first 3 years are mostly like classroom training with a few internships. But then the 4th year, you do more hands-on training, you do clinical rotations. And then after that, you can take your board exam and be a licensed practicing pharmacist. Or if you want to specialize in something like we just talked about infectious disease, you might go on to do a 1-year residency, and then you can follow that and do a 2-year fellowship after that. So I have friends who did those things. I have a friend who does pediatric oncology, and I have a friend who does like emergency medicine. So she works in like the emergency department at like a larger hospital.
So lots of schooling, and that must be how you've learned all of these different medications that you have to be very familiar with.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you have to take continuing education courses to stay up to date and to maintain your license. So what kinds of classes does that include?
Well, you have to do a mixture of live and non-live, I guess. So I use a website that provides continuing education courses. They have to be like accredited somehow. So I do that for my non-live ones. For the live ones, you can do like webinars, or they also have like pharmacy conferences occasionally that you can attend and get your live continuing education that way.
Got it.
Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Is there a difference between a pharmacy and an apothecary? I know that I've definitely seen both at different stores or different places that I've gone to.
Yeah, an apothecary is actually just like an old-fashioned term for pharmacy or a pharmacist. So you might see it more over in like Europe, where they use that term. But really, like calling our pharmacy the apothecary, it's kind of like calling a restaurant the diner, like something like that. So for us, it's just our name.
Okay, that's a useful analogy. I didn't know
Yeah.
that. Awesome. What are some of your favorite aspects of your job?
Oh, I definitely love helping people. When you're a pharmacist, you're kind of in a position where you can help people problem solve and find solutions to things or answer their questions. So definitely helping people, even if it's like a really small thing. I will be humble and say I've never done anything really that major, but just those little small things that you get to do to help people, I really enjoy that.
Awesome. Now, how about challenges? I mean, certainly, especially now we're in a pandemic, but what other challenges do you face in your job frequently?
I would say working with the insurance companies can be really challenging. They can kind of determine what they're going to cover and what it's going to cost for the patient. So that's where some problem solving needs to come in. We need to occasionally look at an alternative that a patient can take that their insurance will cover, or maybe a way to make the medication less expensive.
Yeah, got it. Um, so you said that you love helping people, and that is one of the reasons that you are motivated to go into this field. Do you have the opportunity to establish many close relationships with any of the patients or the regulars that you mentioned?
Yeah, definitely. Some people, it seems like we hear from them almost every day, depending if they have like a large family with a lot of medications and all their refills come due at different times, then we'll see them a lot. So, um, yeah, and I really like getting to know my patients, and it's also really useful to get to know your patients because you can kind of plan ahead if something comes up in the pharmacy and you know that so and so has a certain personality. I might call them ahead of time and warn them about like an issue with their medication, or maybe I know that a certain person that they always come in around a certain time of day. So you can kind of plan your day around that. So it's useful to get to know your patients too.
Sure. Probably makes it more rewarding as well.
Yeah.
How do you learn about new medications that come on the market? We often see, commercials on TV for different things, and it always says, talk to your doctor, talk to your pharmacist. But how do you learn about those?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like I said before, with the continuing education website, that's called the one I use is called the Pharmacist Letter. They have a section that's devoted to the new drugs that come out. And they also have a section for new generics, which that can be useful to know as well when a drug goes from brand to generic. So that's where I look to find out about new drugs. But I will admit there are a lot of new drugs, and a lot of them are really like specialized medications that I might not see, like they're for oncology or cancer. So I will admit that sometimes I just get a new script in the pharmacy and it's for something I haven't seen before, and that's my cue to do some research about that medication.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so you mentioned generics. So those are typically prescriptions that are equal to, right, to a particular branded medication, right? Okay, so in the same way that you could buy a box of Kleenex or you could buy the Walmart brand of a box of tissues, similar to that, right?
Yep.
Okay. If there are multiple different brands, either, you know, the main brand or a generic of the same medication, how do you choose which one to give the patient?
Yeah, so when we're dispensing a medication, if there's a generic, we will most likely dispense the generic unless the insurance or the doctor or the patient specify that they want the brand. And then when it comes to which generic we dispense, well, pharmacy, it is a business. So we have our ordering system set up to always order the least expensive generic that's on the market at that time. So that's kind of what determines which generic we're going to dispense. But when it comes to like multiple medications that are in the same class, so like different brands, that decision would be up to the doctor to make as to like which specific medication that patient's going to get.
Okay. Do you happen to know how long it takes for a brand name drug to be made as a generic option?
I might just be making this up, but I want to say it's either 7 or 13 years, and I can't remember. But there are things that the drug companies can do to extend their patents and make that period that they have exclusive rights to their brand name drug longer. And also the time that they get their patent is not the same as the time that the drug comes to the market. There might be years in between where they are doing research and studies on this drug. So just because drug A comes out in 2020 doesn't mean that the generic is going to be out, you know, exactly in whatever time frame.
Okay, so I didn't realize that. So generic drugs are able to be made once the patent of the original drug has expired. And then
Yep,
it just
and
becomes,
they're normally less expensive.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Cool. Okay, I know that I've certainly had medications in my life where they say you should take this with a meal or with a glass of milk or something like that. Can you tell us more about why some medications have to be taken with food?
Sure. So most of the time it's because the medication can cause some gastric irritation. So taking it with food can help reduce that side effect. But there are some medications where maybe it's more of an absorption issue. So for example, maybe a medication, it gets absorbed more in an acidic environment. And when you eat food, your stomach becomes more acidic. So they might want you to take that medication with food so that it gets absorbed better. But then there are other medications where the opposite is true. Maybe they can't tolerate that acidic environment, so you need to take it without food. Or something in the food like calcium can bind to the drug and make it so that it can't get absorbed into the GI tract. And that's another reason why some medications can't be taken with food.
Interesting. I hadn't realized all of that.
Yeah.
All right. What are some of the most common questions that you get from patients that you work with?
Sure. Probably the most common question that I get is how much is a medication going to cost? I know for people when they're starting a new medication and maybe they know it's a brand name medication, that there are no generics available, maybe they know it's expensive. And since it's up to the insurance what they're going to have to pay for that medication. So it can be stressful for people when they're starting a new medication, not sure what it's going to cost, monthly or yearly. So that's probably the most common question that I get, but we get a variety of questions, like with or without food is a common one. If there are any drug interactions with their other medications, what over-the-counter things to try to treat, different ailments, are some of the common questions that I get.
Sure. Thank you. Do you think that everyone should take a probiotic if they are on an antibiotic? And in addition to that question, I know that recently there's been some differing thoughts on whether yogurt can be an effective probiotic or not. Do you have any thoughts on either of those?
Yeah, well, it's always changing. So that's one thing where I used to recommend yogurt as an alternative because some probiotics are really expensive. In fact, the one that I recommend the most, because it was the one studied with antibiotics, it's expensive. So I used to say, oh yeah, yogurt's okay too. But more recently, what I've seen is that yogurt's not a good enough alternative. So now I've kind of quit recommending yogurt. It won't hurt. But yeah, that's something where my recommendation has changed over the years because the research shows different things, but I do oftentimes recommend a probiotic. Going back to your first question, when you're taking an antibiotic, it can be useful. But one thing that I point out is that you do want to separate it by at least 2 hours before or after your antibiotic,
Okay.
so that they don't negate the effects of it. So.
Oh, okay. I'd never thought about that before. That is good to know. What are some of the responsibilities that you have? Because certainly you handle a lot of patients' sensitive and confidential information.
Yeah, so we're really careful about the personal information at the pharmacy. Anything that we're done using gets shredded. Also, we're careful about what we say that might be overheard by other patients in the pharmacy. Like, I typically wouldn't say to my coworker, oh, are you done with so-and-so's whatever medication? Like, I wouldn't put both the name and the medication together in a sentence that might be overheard by another person. And I also try to be conscious of that when I'm doing my patient counseling, answering questions that people have, whether it's on the phone or in the pharmacy. Of course, you can't, completely avoid that sometimes, especially with your patients who are hard of hearing and you have to shout things to them. But yeah, we're really careful with stuff like that. And it even goes as far as, like, I wouldn't come home and say to my husband, oh, I saw our friend so-and-so at the pharmacy today. Like, even that we consider their private information.
Got it. So of course, the Tomorrow's Talent Series program is all about helping students discover potential career paths. And, one of the questions that we like to ask in our sessions is what kinds of soft skills a pharmacist might need or might be useful for somebody interested in pursuing pharmacy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I did bring up in my video, I think I brought up communication as being really important, and also attention to detail. But some other skills that are really useful are problem-solving skills, and also leadership. Even if you're not the pharmacy manager, when you are the pharmacist working, the technicians that you're working with are working under your license. So it is kind of up to you to decide how things are going to go in the pharmacy, and those people that you're working with are kind of looking to you to be a leader. So even if you're not in a management position, just being the pharmacist makes you kind of a leader. So leadership skills are also important.
Great, thank you so much. Do you have any advice for students who might be interested in going into this field?
Yeah, I would say that one thing that I heard a lot while I was in school was, oh, like, what a great thing to go into. You'll be able to find a job anywhere. Yeah, that's still true. There are a lot of pharmacy positions, and you can work, you know, you don't have to work in a big city. You can work in a small town if you want to too. But the job market is getting smaller. There are a lot more schools of pharmacy, and there are a lot more people going into pharmacy. So I would just warn people that, like, you might not be able to get your dream job in your dream location right out of school. So that's just kind of something that's changing in the field right now.
That is really good information to know. Awesome. Now, earlier you had mentioned that, you know, for example, the information about taking yogurt with an antibiotic is one of the things that has changed since you've, you know, been in this profession. Is there anything else that has changed, or have new technologies or other things changed the way that you do your work since you've started?
Oh, definitely. You know, medicine's always changing with new studies that come out. Like, even, like, just off the top of my head, I used to recommend stool softeners to people, but now I've recently read something saying, oh, we're finding out stool softeners aren't so effective. So now I lean more towards recommending, like, Miralax first for constipation. So that's just one example. As for new technologies, the pharmacy that I work in doesn't have a lot of technology, but I have worked at other pharmacies that do have like counting machines to help with your accuracy and efficiency in the pharmacy. And a lot of pharmacies have barcode scanners where you scan the drug and the label that the computer generated to make sure you're picking out the same drug, the correct drug. So yeah, there are new technologies coming out and changes every day.
Great. Last question, is there anything else that you would like students to know about this field that we haven't already discussed?
Yeah, I don't want to be negative, but I also just want to bring up some of the cons to being a pharmacist. I do really enjoy my job, but I just want to point out that, like, I get to work at independent pharmacy, which is really nice. But a lot of the big chain pharmacies, they really push for you to do like a certain number of scripts per hour and like turn this much profit. There's a lot of pressure from corporate. So it can be like a really high stress, even in my job, it can be a really high stress environment too, just because you have patients, they're waiting and they want their medications now. And, you know, you're trying to be accurate. So just some things to maybe think about, like some practical things to think about that like aren't so great about being a pharmacist. But another thing I wanted to bring up, but I also really don't want to sound negative, is that you do have to work some weekends, typically, whether you're inpatient or retail pharmacy. You might have to work the evenings. And most pharmacies that you work in, retail pharmacies that you work in, they do not have lunch breaks. So you just work through the day without any breaks. Most pharmacists get pretty good at like eating really quickly in the corner. So those are just some things that to think about. There are a lot of great things about being a pharmacist, but every job has its pros and cons.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. You know, one of our goals with this series is to provide as much accurate information as we can. We want people to feel empowered that they're making career decisions based on what they know, and we want what they know to be, you know, as truthful as possible. So thank you so much for all of that feedback. So it looks like we are just about out of time here. So of course, Caren, thank you so much for joining us today, for giving us all of this great information. As a reminder, we feature a new theme every month with tomorrow's talent series. Next month's theme is going to be technology fields. And of course, a huge thank you to all of our different partners who have made this series possible. The MySTEM Network, Upper Peninsula Michigan Works, Bay College, Go Give It College, and our career tech educators across the Upper Peninsula. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you again, Caren, for all of your time. We appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me here. I hope it was helpful.
Absolutely was. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Bye.